You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Kinesic.
Welcome back to The Buzz, brought to you by the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. I am Fran Chismar.
And I'm Tom Kinesic, and today's we're buzzing into episode 176. And before we get into all the fun native plant stuff, we like to do a little bit of follow-up on some past episodes. So, Fran, I'm going to read this one as it's written and say, Spotify reviews?
So, you can't really write a review on Spotify, but you can now ask a question and let people answer. And I find it interesting that I can't respond to any of the things that people write, but someone said, hey, if I leave a comment on Spotify, does that count as the same thing as leaving a review on Apple Podcasts? Yeah, so we hadn't discussed it, so I didn't know how you felt about it.
I don't really know because we can't respond to them. I think we should.
Well, we can't respond to a review either on Apple.
Yeah.
But if you want to say something positive in a Spotify comment, that's probably our second most. We get the most listens from Apple Podcasts. Spotify is a distant second, but maybe we should count that just so we're including Android users as well, I'm thinking.
Yeah. What's the one that has a question and comment?
I think it was. Ooh, good question. Well, they all have a question. I think someone commented on the last Camille Dungy one.
Okay, let me take a look.
Because that's what sparked the question.
Okay. That's a weird feature that Spotify has.
It is a weird feature.
Is like I can't see that person's on my Spotify account. Now, it doesn't know I'm the creator, but I can't see their question.
And I did publish it.
Yeah.
Like, when the question comes in, you choose whether you want to publish it.
I wonder if I have to type something in there. We're working right now. I don't know. It doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
I don't know how all this works.
Maybe we're the only ones that see it. I don't know. Yeah. But I had the option to publish it.
Because it says I can read the reply that I wrote, but I can't see anyone else's reply.
Interesting.
But we can see. The important thing is Fran is able to see if you do that.
So we'll
count. And somehow you're able to reply to those, but I don't know how.
I can't. No, it doesn't give me. It gives me the option to publish but not reply.
Huh. Interesting.
Publish, delete, or that's it.
All right. Yeah, but I think yes, we'll do that.
All right.
But it's got to be. How do you receive the? I'm not on the receiving end of these.
I get an
things.
Email.
So you get an email, so it could be on any episode, and you'll get it,
and
then you can compile it. Or I was going to say, should they have to leave it on the Camille Dungy episode just so that they're all in one place?
Anywhere.
Doesn't matter.
I think anywhere. And the interesting thing is, I don't make up a questions. I can. But they just do a generic, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah. Yep.
So, and that's what people are responding to. So if you leave a comment on a Spotify episode, we will count that the same as an Apple review.
I think that's fair.
And we did have, I love that, and we'll get into this during listener shout-outs, but someone left their review and titled it episode 180 as a reminder, because I never remember what we agree upon. So
I remembered it was episode 180. Yeah.
So episode 180, we're going to pick two winners. We have 2 autographed copies of Soil that we're going to give out. So we're just going to figure out. I think, what are we going to do? Assign a random number to each review?
Yes.
And figure out if we're going from the bottom up or for the...
Yeah, remember last time we did this and we
didn't know which way we were going?
We said
we're going to figure it out.
It was number 37 is the winner, but then we didn't know if we were counting back 37 or from the beginning 30.
And now we have to figure out
both.
where the Spotify people will land on that as well.
Yep.
So we'll figure it all out. We'll figure it out. All right, but that's the only thing I had for follow up. I didn't know if you had anything.
I guess it's not necessarily follow up. It's alluding to the future. An episode we recorded yesterday that is going to air next Friday, and I'm going to apologize in advance for how like crazy some of my rambling is about mosquitoes and Zika virus. And all. I have a really well-formed thought. It just does not come out well-formed at all.
No, and the funny thing is we're going to be discussing this, I don't want to get too far ahead. My article deals with some of that, and then we're going to have a guest on that I'll talk about when we talk about the article.
So for those of you listening to this now, and then when you hear that, know that I'm trying to say that oftentimes I feel like we overreact to a minor problem and it gets blown out of proportion by the media.
Yeah.
And it's not just with environmental stuff, it's with all kinds of stuff. And sometimes the cure is worse than the cause in some instances. Not all. But I feel afterwards I'm like, am I making I don't want people to think I'm making light of like West Nile and Zika. Like they're really terrible things. But
it goes well in context with what we were talking about.
Yeah.
And I agree. Like there tends to be a huge knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
Which is you got to scale it back a little bit.
A big knee-jerk reaction that, and this is the part I was really getting at, that someone is making money off of.
Yes.
And that's why it's driving like this fear and panic that you need to get rid of all the mosquitoes for not just because they're a nuisance in your yard, but because they're life-threatening. Yeah. And because, well, that makes somebody money.
Yeah. Or ticks. We're going to get rid of the ticks because of Lyme's disease, and we're going to save you that. But
Yep.
we discuss that. You'll understand it more when you hear next week's episode.
But, so I'm glad I'm putting it out beforehand so that people realize that, maybe he did have I'll give him the benefit of the doubt instead of doing it afterwards. And then people are like, wow, that sounds really, really dumb.
No, I felt it was all in good context.
Yeah.
All in good context. So all right. You have anything else other than that?
No, I think we should get in the plants we're vibing with this week and start with That's Hot.
That's hot.
Why don't you go? Because I agree with yours. I just want to hear about it.
I can do that. And I will say first that I was actually going to pick your plant.
Were you really?
I really was. And then I saw you had it in there. So I'm like, I guess I got to find something else. And basically, my plant this week is one I saw last week, and it was Vernonia novaborsensis, which is New York ironweed. It's one I'm sure we've talked about. We've definitely talked about in the podcast. Yeah. We've probably featured it here before. I might have even done it a year ago.
I don't know.
It looked great.
We have a couple around our pond that just look phenomenal.
Yeah. But a little bit from Jersey Friendly Yards about this plant is New York ironweed features purple flowers which bloom on tall stalks from August to September. Then flower nectar offers food to bees and butterflies, and the dried seeds offer food to birds. New York ironweed can self-seed vigorously, plant in a mass to use as a background plant in borders, meadows, and moist, naturalized areas of your yard. Keyword being moist, it's going to want moisture soils. And I actually just made a video about this plant that's on our Instagram chat. I think it got posted already.
And background is a good key, too, because it does get tall.
Yes.
Was it 5 to 6?
5 to 7. And the ones I was standing next to were every bit of 7. Yeah. And because in the video, I even pointed out, like, these plants are significantly taller than me. I'm 6'3". They were at least 6 foot taller than I am. But also, it's a slope. It's a hill. So they're downhill from where I am and still taller. Than me. And so they were just, like, full bloom, buzzing with life. There's, like, a pair of monarchs that are feeding on the nectar. And cool. All kinds of little bees. And then in the video, I call them it a bee, and then as I'm editing the video, I'm like, I don't think that's actually a bee. I think that's a fly. So I put a little caveat in there saying maybe not a bee.
Maybe.
But it was just so a buzz with life. And when you have that mass planting, now these were it was a small planting, and it really just spread. It's and mixed with the yellow goldenrods, just has like a really, really like royal kind of color combination. Similar to that asters and goldenrods that Robin Wall Kilmer writes about. It's just like you have a wall of this dark green with the really cool leaves that are all eaten up, and then just like a mat of purple. And in a big swath. It was like an artist had taken it and painted it. It was so cool.
And so important late in the season when pollinators are really starting to lose some of their nectar sources as plants finish their blooms for the year. I love the late bloom on this one. Like you said, along with goldenrod and aster, you could see the pollinators just so happy to have that source. Great choice. Fantastic choice.
Yeah. And Fran, tell us about my other choice.
So I chose black gum or black tupelo, which is Nyssa sylvatica. It's a fact-wet species and ranges in height from 30 to 50 foot tall, but can ultimately get much larger, can get 60, 70 foot tall. It has waxy dark green foliage that's very attractive to begin with. It turns reddish purple in the fall, and it kind of has tinges of orange and yellow. Its native ranges from Maine to Florida, west to Texas, and north to Michigan. The tree is a honey plant, so bees will use the nectar or pollen to make honey. Flowers are male and female, born on separate trees, and they bloom in the April to June range, depending on where you're at. The reason why I picked this one, though, is the fruit, which is out right now. It's a dark blue drupe that can get up to a half-inch long. It's bitter in taste, but it's loved by turkeys, robins, woodpeckers, thrushes, flickers, brown thrashers, and mockingbirds. And it's been cited as an important food source for songbirds getting ready to migrate. And also in the cavities in the trunk, woodpeckers, bats, and tree frogs will actually nest in it. So multi-use, but you can't miss the berries right now.
Yeah.
Like and they're on.
Well, you can if the birds get them.
If the birds get them. So I always get this, like I know a petiole is what connects the leaf to the tree. A peduncle is what connects the flower to the plant. What is the stem that connects the fruit to the tree?
You're asking someone who last took a botany class 14 years ago.
All right.
I will add, I didn't do that well, which is surprising with my career choice.
I feel like I should know this.
What connects the fruit to a tree? Oh, gosh.
Connects the fruit
This is
a tree.
This is a hard thing to look up quickly. And there's so many people like cursing at us right now.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm sure there's others that are like, oh,
people yelling it out.
I know that too.
You know, it's funny because I'm searching it and nothing is coming up.
Maybe you can make up a name.
Maybe. So if you have petiole and peduncle, it's got to be something with a P.
Yeah.
There you go. How's that for creativity?
Right. Yeah.
All right, it begins with a P. But it's very long.
Yes.
Like it's so the fruit kind of dangles, which is very cool. So it really stands out. You have that dark green waxy leaf that's starting to turn reddish purple, and you have this dark blue black fruit that's kind of dangling off. You can't miss it. The birds are going crazy. It's just a very cool plant to begin with. And black gum has a very interesting curves in the branches. Like the branches they have a lot of like zigzag motion in it. So they're very twiggy trees to begin with. So it just has a very cool look to it.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely do. And why I was thinking about this plant was, while it is great for birds and turkeys and all kinds of things will eat this, people can eat them too. And so, yeah, I was snacking on some. I didn't know that. I don't know why I didn't know it, but I was just driving by a tree with my brother yesterday. He's like, yeah, this is what he noticed is this tree is really sour, but this tree is like really sweet. And the ones we were eating almost had like a flavor similar to like, if you ever picked like a wild grape and mixed it with a blueberry.
Oh.
And it had its own unique flavor too, but like those two is probably the most similar comparison that I could come up with. Even the sweet ones still had like a little bit of tartness to it. But the other tree was very tart. But it was just interesting just from tree to tree how there's sort of same thing happens with pawpaws where you get like, I would say even on the same tree, you can have like wild variation in flavor. And so that's, if you ever had a bad pawpaw, that shouldn't be your last pawpaw, because the next one could be great. I picked a couple the other day, and the first one, it was okay, but it wasn't great. I don't even know if it was good. It was okay. But the one I had after that was by far the best one I've ever had. And they were same tree right next to each other. So,
all right. So I found the answer because I'm like, all right, it's a fruit stem, but what is the stem called? So you have petiole for the leaf, peduncle for the flower, and a pedicel.
Pedicel. I've heard that before. Yeah.
For the stalk. Let's see. Similar found in other plants. Let's see. A pedicel. Maybe I'm wrong. Now I'm reading it and I'm like, I don't know if it's really talking about what that is. For the botanical term for the stem of a fruit or a vegetable.
Well,
is a pedicel. Yeah. So that's what it's saying it is.
What would you say a fruit that has a structure and texture like a drupe, but does not fit the actual technical definition of a drupe?
I don't know.
It's drupaceous.
Drupaceous?
Drupaceous
is that a real term?
It's a real term from Wikipedia. It's a real term. But yeah, so other fruits that are technically drupes are coffee, jujubes, mangoes, olives, pistachios, cashews, all members of the genus Prunus, including the almond, apricot, cherry, damson, peach, nectarine, and plum. All drupes. Most stone fruits. Wow. It even talks about like how you can even have, again, this is from Wikipedia, so it's not the most trusted source, but I doubt anyone's really messing with the Wikipedia.
Oh yeah,
like on drupes, on drupes. This has got to be someone who probably knows what they're talking about. But a lot of berries are actually druplets, where the individuals are the druplet, and then they form an aggregate fruit.
Oh,
off their own thing. Huh. Interesting.
See, even we learned something today.
Yeah.
So pedicel. Are you gonna? I'll remember that now.
Yeah.
Petiole, peduncle, and pedicel.
You know, is one thing I didn't learn until this year is with peaches. How there's like freestone and clingstone peaches, which when you think about it, actually really makes sense. I didn't know. I was like, a peach is a peach. What is freestone peach? What's that? But yeah, it just means that the flesh doesn't cling to the pit.
Oh.
Where clingstone, it's stuck on there. You ever have, like, there's some peaches you cut it, like you cut the, what would it be? Not the equator. Well, I guess you could cut the equator, but you'd cut the prime meridian, and then you twist it, and like it'll come off. There's some peaches that the skin just like rotate. Those are clingstone peaches. The ones where it doesn't come off. Okay. The one where you can like twist it and pops right off. That's a freestone peach.
Very cool. Yeah. Very cool. I saw a funny, was it Twitter or an X post, and someone just posted, another wooden ball. Can someone please tell avocado producers to mix up the random toy inside?
That's a good one. The other, I wonder if an avocado's a drupe.
I don't know.
It might be.
All right.
A little aside, as you're looking that up, Fran, is I'm listening to a book now called The Wager by David Gran. He wrote the book Killers of the Flower Moon, which I also haven't read yet. It's on my Libby wait list. But that's becoming a movie, Martin Scorsese movie with like Leo DiCaprio and all these famous people. And I think it's about the start of the FBI in like the Old West. But he wrote this book about The Wager, which was a British naval vessel that wrecked off of the coast of Chile. But in the book, he's talking about all these nautical terms that are like just like regular phrases of speech. Like under the weather was when you were too sick on the boat, you went under the deck and you were under the weather. Yeah. Like 3 sheets to the wind was about like ropes that held the sails in place and they were worthless if something happened. There's a whole bunch. There's like a lot. I mean, like phrases that you wouldn't, when you're thinking about them, don't sound nautical at all. Like under the weather, it doesn't necessarily sound nautical. A lot of those are actually like nautical phrases because of the British Navy and then going to port towns. And the port towns kind of dictate a lot of the language. I was bringing that up to talk about something else. Oh, yeah. Prime meridian. How I described the peaches. That was before they like talked about the prime meridian. It was they didn't really have like a way. You didn't know how far west you went. Oh, and that's so. What they would do is they kind of like you could tell in certain hemispheres. In the northern hemisphere, you could look at the sky and tell more easily where you were. When you're in the southern hemisphere, it was a lot harder. And so they would do like a calculation based on certain things, including dropping a rope with knots on it to tell how fast they were going. because you're going against the rotation of the Earth.
Okay.
So they had to know how fast they were going in something else, and that's where the term knots comes from with sailing for speed. And but the prime meridian was like eventually kind of invented to help with that, I think.
All right.
And so you kind of had like a little, like you could tell with the equator, you could tell if your latitude, but it was really hard to tell your longitude. That's what it was, and that's why they came up with that. And then the GMT, you know, when you're looking at time, and you have to GMT. You know what GMT stands for?
No clue.
Greenwich Mean Time, and that was
which I should know
set,
that, but
this is where zero is.
All right,
Greenwich Mean Time. All kinds
like
of
I know the term Greenwich
facts,
Mean Time, but if you were to say what does it mean, I'd be like I don't remember.
Yeah.
So all right, so I did look up
avocados.
Is an avocado a drupe? And it says a stone fruit or drupe, meanwhile, is a fleshy fruit with a hard pit inside, which contains a single seed, which are peaches, nectarines, plums, and apricots. Drupes have a fleshy mesocarp, but a tough, leathery endocarp. An avocado is fleshy throughout, so it cannot be considered a drupe.
Oh, so it's kind of drupaceous.
Oh, maybe. Let's see. Is an avocado drupaceous?
Oh, gosh. We're really going down the rabbit hole today. It might be a word that was made up.
You know what? It's not really saying... It's saying what it's not, but it's not really saying what it is.
All right.
It's a climacteric single-seeded berry.
Interesting. All right.
Climacteric single-seeded berry due to the imperceptible endocarp covering the seed. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. That's your answer.
Yeah. Think about that.
I'm not going to remember.
Think about that next time you're putting it on your toast, you damn millennials. of which I am one.
All right. Enough
back to native plants. Native plants.
All right. How about some this or that? We should move on. You can get with this, or you can get with that. All right. So the last buzz are articles where I had the article on flammable natives and non-natives, and Tom's was on the garden rant. And the response to Alan Armitage's article, a lot of passionate responses to that, this or that, and a lot of people were very happy that you brought this article up, and it showed with the vote, and you won 21-10. Yeah. So, and it makes sense. I mean,
thank you everyone except for Brad Madrinsky who had to vote for Fran.
I got 10 votes.
One of the comments that I totally agree with, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up is it gives, when you get those articles that are written the other way, it gives a lot of credit and permission to that opinion. Yeah. Which I think we kind of all recognize as not being the scientifically accurate opinion. Yeah. It's an opinion, but it's. So that's what I kind of wanted to bring up there, was just this is what the kickback is, and we need to be cognizant of that as people promoting native plants, what people criticize about them, and what arguments they have, because you're going to have those conversations, and when someone brings that up, you need to know that they might bring it up and then have a response already. Yeah.
It was, we mentioned a lot of people commented about this in the Facebook group. We were getting private messages just thanking us for having this conversation. Yeah. So it was, these are conversations we would have had anyway behind closed doors. Yeah. It's just nice that we have a venue that we can air those conversations. Mm-hmm. But it was nice to know that there were so many like-minded people that felt the way that definitely. We did about it. So. And I did say we were going to get back to native plants with this segment, but knowing what my article is and seeing your article, Fran, I don't know how much we're actually going to be talking about native plants here. Yeah, maybe not.
So,
maybe not.
Fran, I'm going to defer my choice and let you pick if you would like me to go first or you go first.
You know what? I'll go first.
All right.
I'll go first. You cool with that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
So my article this week, a little backstory, was we received a phone call at the office from one of our customers and former guest, Cynthia Blackwood from Friends of High School Park. And she reached out on our conversation about the EcoShield salesman coming to my property and the conversation we had from the last buzz. And she let me know about an article that had been written by Beth Yount, who is with Penn State Cooperative Extension and also a former guest of ours, about a very similar topic. And after reading the article, I decided to choose it, but Beth is actually going to come back on the podcast as a guest, and we're going to focus a whole episode on this probably sometime in late October or early November. But we have that definitely coming up. So Beth wanted me to point out that she had help with this article by entomologists Amy Corman and Jamie Kopko from Penn State. So this article is from extension.psu.edu, and it's called Watershed Friendly Mosquito Control. And here we go. Aquatic macroinvertebrates are important to stream health and aquatic food webs. These macroinvertebrates, such as stoneflies, caddisflies, mayflies, and more, are at the base of the food web relationship that allows cycling of materials and nutrients within well-functioning aquatic systems. They eat organic matter, such as leaves, plant material, woody debris, algae, and bacteria, and are then eaten by other organisms or emerge from the water and transport those nutrients back to terrestrial ecosystems. Without benthic macroinvertebrates, there is disruption in food webs for fish, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and other wildlife in and adjacent to waterways. Many land use, such as urban development, construction, agricultural, and residential land management practices, can disturb the ecology of waterways by introducing pollutants or sediments that impair the ability of aquatic insects to live or reproduce. One such activity is the broad-scale application of insecticides, such as pyrethroids, that are considered reasonably safe for mammals, but are very toxic to many aquatic organisms. This harm to non-target organisms is particularly problematic when the pesticide application is non-selective and is done in a manner that is not effective at controlling target organism. This is the case with many residential mosquito control services that generally spray backyards with pyrethroid insecticides, which are synthetic versions of an insecticide produced by a type of chrysanthemum flower. Why is general non-targeted spraying a concern? These treatments target only adult mosquitoes, but adults are the most difficult life stage mosquitoes to manage because they are mobile, widely distributed, and spend much of their time resting in protected areas. As a result, adult mosquito treatments must use large amounts of insecticide over large areas to be effective. These insecticides are not specific to mosquitoes, so the treatment is likely to kill any other insect in the treated area. In many cases, the products used to manage mosquitoes remain active for 1 or 2 months, so the hazards to non-target insects remain long after the treatment is applied. In addition, continuous exposure to the same insecticides over many generations can result in the development of insecticide resistance, making future control more difficult. Insecticide applications to eliminate adult mosquitoes fit into mosquito IPM, but only when justified by heavy biting pressure and or disease transmission risk, based on systematic mosquito and disease surveillance. Despite careful application, sometimes pesticides move from the target and the contaminant adjacent areas, including creeks, streams, and other water bodies. Unfortunately, pyrethroids break down more slowly in water, especially where there is less sunlight, and persist for much longer in aquatic sediments. This increases harmful impacts on non-targeted organisms when residue enters waterways. I swear, this isn't much longer. It's very complicated, but I'm getting a ton.
Oh, yeah.
You can see why I chose this. The most effective and watershed-friendly mosquito control uses integrated pest management, IPM, that specifically targets the mosquito life cycle and logical points where mosquitoes breed or rest. IPM is a decision-making process that weighs the risks and benefits of many control methods against the risks created by the pest. This can reduce mosquito populations and the likelihood of mosquito-borne illness while minimizing hazards to pollinators, aquatic macroinvertebrates, and other non-target organisms. Recommended strategies for managing mosquitoes include removing any areas of standing water or access to standing water. This should be done at least once a week to disrupt the reproductive cycle by preventing mosquitoes from laying eggs. Make sure to eliminate empty, clean, tightly cover screen with mesh smaller than an adult mosquito to discard any outdoor objects that may hold water. This can include old tires, buckets or containers, rain barrels or cisterns, planter basins, toys, kiddie pools, lids, bird baths, trash or recycling containers, open plumbing vents, even clogged gutters where water can pool. Septic tank owners should inspect for any cracks, gaps, or openings and repair them to prevent mosquito entry. To eliminate larvae in standing water or small ponds that cannot be drained, covered, or removed, adding products derived from naturally occurring bacteria called Bacillus thuringiensis is granules or dunks can be effective. For isolated ponds or water gardens, small insect-eating fish may be stocked with care to avoid introducing non-native and potentially destructive species and following regulations from the PA Fish and Boat Commission. In addition to removing mosquito breeding sites, removing resting sites for adult mosquitoes may decrease pressure from some mosquito species. Adult mosquitoes rest in areas protected from sunlight, extreme temperatures, wind, and drying out. These may include wood piles, hollow trees, dense vegetation, undersides of decks and porches, and crawl spaces and basements. However, many species have long flight ranges and can find resting sites elsewhere. Community-wide mass deployment of mosquito traps may provide relief from some species of mosquitoes with little to no non-target effects, though many mosquito species will not be captured in high enough numbers to significantly affect biting pressure. The traps consist of a container of water that attract egg-laying mosquitoes and are most effective against species that favor small breeding containers and have short flight ranges, such as the Asian tiger mosquito. These traps typically work best if at least 80% of homes in a residential area use at least 2 traps in their yard. For adult mosquitoes, wearing protective clothing such as long pants and sleeves or using insect repellents or skin or clothing can prevent bites. Additional interventions include limiting outdoor activities at peak mosquito biting times, screening areas, and using electric fans or repellent emitters where people gather after dusk. Focus any insecticide treatments only on areas where adult mosquitoes rest or seek shelter during the day, like piles of wood or debris. Any areas that are immediately adjacent to waterways that include plants that are frequented by beneficial insects and pollinators should be avoided. That is a wealth of information.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of like spells it out and talks about a lot of the things that we thought and knew that, you know, a lot of these things are targeting more than just mosquitoes in areas that are affecting other things. Like we talked about my neighbor and me, and having that conversation with the neighbor. We back up to a waterway, and I was just explaining to him with the, you know, if you want to decrease pressure, take away some of the hiding sites like English ivy that he has in the yard. It's not only invasive, but mosquitoes like to hide in there. Removing standing water, cleaning up some of those things, and using maybe citronella candles or thermocells, you know, but spraying isn't solving the problem because we have a bat population that feed on mosquitoes, dragonflies that feed on mosquitoes, but you're hurting these other things by spraying, but you're not fixing the breeding sites. So you may spray, but they're going to keep coming back, but you're hurting everything else and you're just breaking down the ecosystem. Yeah. So one of the things that Beth and I talked about via email were just the amount of misinformation that's being given out to homeowners from these companies, that it's non-toxic, that it's all organic, so it's not hurting anything. We're just killing these things, which you don't want, which isn't necessarily the truth. And she sent a picture of a company whose van said, "We kill mosquitoes, not bees," which, sure, that's not necessarily true. Yeah, you know, it's a nice thought, but probably not 100% accurate. So I'm looking forward to having a broader conversation about this, about more things that can be done, some of the myths that are being told to people, and some of the ways that you can talk to neighbors if they're having treatments like this done, just to kind of expel some of these myths that are told by the companies that are profiting from spraying these things. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. One thing that's worked for me is I just got, and this is anecdotal, but it was a side-by-side study. When I was up in Maine about a month and a half ago, we stopped at the L Bean store, and I got this like lightweight hoodie, and it has something called Insect Shield on it. And basically it looked at it was, it's treated with permethrin, which is something that kills ticks and insects. And that's one of the things that I've seen people recommend for ticks sometimes is they like treat a rope with permethrin and like tie it in a place the ticks will go to it. And then that way you're not spraying it and killing all this other stuff. Permethrin can be somewhat toxic to humans, but what I've seen, you can even buy the bottles of it.
Okay.
And then you drench your clothes with it and then let it dry, and then you wear them. Okay. You don't want to put it on wet because then it can have negative impacts to you. Once it dries, it's safer. But this comes with it already, and we were out fishing. One night I wasn't wearing it, and I was getting eaten alive. My wife was getting bit up. Next night I'm wearing it. My wife's not wearing it. I didn't get a single bite.
Wow.
And she was getting eaten up.
Interesting.
And it was just like as soon as the sun set, they were out in force. And so yeah, that's something that just really worked for me. And it was long sleeve, but it was lightweight, so I could wear it in an 80-degree day. It wasn't an issue. So I was like, oh, this would be like really good for camping, hiking.
Yeah.
Honestly, I wore the shirt like almost every single day. And I'm like, this probably stinks by the end. But yeah, so that was
awesome.
Just, you can get the stuff yourself, or you can, there's companies out there that have it in the products they're selling now. So
yeah, I hadn't heard of that. I'll have to look that up. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. So,
all right. So what do you, I actually can't wait to hear your article because I read the title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is something that popped up on my feed the other day. Originally, I was going to use there's an article that came out in the New York Times, another Margaret Roach article, talking about how Cornell University had done research and had some suggestions for lawn alternatives using, I think it was Danthonia spicata, and there was another Danthonia species. And then they said you can mix in some other low-growing native flowering species and have like a flowering short mow once or twice type lawn. And I don't like to use articles that are shared too much because I want to bring something new to the table. And then I was like, I saw it once. I'm like, oh, this is going to be my article. And then I was like, oh, twice, 3, 4, 5. And I'm like, I'm getting emailed it. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick something else. But that is a great article if you want to read it. And that was a guy, Todd Bittner, from the Cornell.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know if it's called Cornell Botanic Gardens or what they call it now. But works there, and he did a lot of the research on that and is cited in the article quite a bit, and really, really nice guy. And so I went a different route. And I found another article that was written by this guy, Thomas Christopher, who I believe is the host of the Growing Greener podcast.
Oh, okay.
And it was titled, it came out in the Berkshire Eagle, which is a regional newspaper in Massachusetts. And the title of it was, "The imported Coosa dogwood was once hailed as a substitute for dying native dogwood trees. Now it's classified as an invasive species," which I hadn't heard. I'd heard that Coosas were starting to escape into the wild areas. I hadn't seen it, but
I haven't seen it personally.
Yeah, but it's something that I have heard people talking about, and I've seen it on some watch lists here and there. So, but it goes in a little bit. The article goes in a little bit about why it may take a while for a non-native plant species to become invasive. And that was really interesting to me. So I'll read the article, and then I'll give some more of my thoughts.
All right.
So, I heard a wake-up call loud and clear last summer. I was part of a group touring a garden in Connecticut, and we were gathered round a handsome Coosa dogwood in full bloom. Various members of the group commented that similar trees in their gardens were spawning seedlings in adjacent woodlands. Subsequently, I found that the species has recently been identified as an emerging invasive in the state of New Jersey. How could this be? For decades, I had heard Coosa dogwoods described as harmless in this respect. The species was originally introduced into North America from the East Asian homeland in the 19th century, but it remained a rare collector's plant until the mid-1970s. That was when an anthracnose fungus became ravaging populations of our native dogwood tree, Cornus florida. Coosa dogwoods proved virtually immune to the disease and were heavily promoted as a substitute for the dying natives. Soon this rarity was planted all over. Don't worry was the message, this species won't spread spontaneously and become invasive because the Coosa dogwood fruits don't appeal to American wildlife. Our native dogwood, Cornus florida, produces small, fat-rich berries that are the mainstay for migrating birds and spread seeds all over. The Coosa dogwood's fruits, by contrast, are larger, the size and color of raspberries, and are food for monkeys in its original East Asian home. There's no monkeys in North America, that the reasoning went, so the Coosa dogwood couldn't spread. Except it has. A little research yielded additional disturbing facts. Researchers who had investigated the genetic material of the anthracnose fungus had concluded that it, too, is probably of foreign origin. The Coosa dogwood's tolerance of it suggests that they likely evolved together, and that the fungus may well have been brought to the eastern United States as a hitchhiker on imported Coosa dogwood. Still, I wonder why this species seems to have strayed very little outside of gardens for so long and just now is turning invasive. For insights to this, I turn to Bethany Bradley, a PhD, a scientist at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, whose field of research includes invasion ecology, the study of how plants and animal species establish themselves when introduced into the landscape outside their native range, why they spread, and what the impact may have as immigrants on a local ecosystem. Bradley explained to me that there is commonly a lag between when plant species introduced into the new home and when it begins to behave invasively. There can be a number of reasons for this. The initial introductions may be few and isolated, as was the case with the Coosa dogwoods before the 1970s. Such isolated specimens don't provide a sufficient population to breed and spread. Another cause for lag may be the plant needs time to adapt to its new environment. Alternatively, a change in the local conditions, especially climate, may favor the introduced species, sparking a population explosion. In this era of climate change, Bradley added, we may expect to see many formerly well-behaved introductions turn invasive. Related to this is sometimes a disturbance, whether fire, flood, or the arrival of new pests, such as the dogwood anthracnose, may open gaps in the vegetation that provide opportunities for invasion. In light of this information, I wonder if the enduring popularity of introduced plants among gardeners may pose an unacceptable risk. The plant hunters who collect such plants from foreign climes are, in my experience, responsible people who are trying to avoid introducing plants that may become invasive. Daniel Hinckley, the dean of this profession, for example, collaborated with botanist Sarah Reichard in the early 2000s to develop a checklist of traits that indicate whether a species would be a risk as an introduction. Still, given the history of the Coosa dogwood, I wonder how many collectors may have spread a plant across the continent only to learn too late that it was a mistake. Bradley suggested that if gardeners would want to cultivate rarities, they look to the many unexploited plants in their own native floras. In this, there is no threat of releasing a new plant hoodlum, and in an era of climate change, when such natives are stressed, propagating them and giving them additional homes may be lifesavers. That's a better mission for gardeners, in my opinion. So this was something I didn't think Coosa dogwood, non-native dogwood, had invasive tendencies until I just heard about it fairly recently. And there's a lot of breeding going into Coosa dogwood now to get different colors, primarily pink and red. Yeah. And happening right at Rutgers in New Jersey. Really, really cool breeding program that they have going on.
Been happening since the 90s, at least, maybe the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, when I went on a tour of that back in, I guess it was late May, early June, of the breeding they're doing, and talking about how they were trying to get pink. It just seemed to happen randomly. Yeah. They'd get a pink one, and they couldn't get it to happen when they tried to. And so then they basically just took there's a little change. The one guy who was in charge retired. A new guy came in who was his protege for a long time. And he just said, you've been trying to really dial in and have exactly the two partners that you want to produce a pink one, and it hasn't worked. I'm going to go the other way and just take a shotgun approach and just here's 1,000 plants. And okay, now we're going to take the pink ones and make 1,000 more and then do it again and just let it happen randomly until we get consistently pink ones, and then we'll start to really dial in. So that's where the Scarlet Fire dogwood came from, was that breeding program. So there's some really cool stuff there and it's a later flowering tree. You don't see many trees that flower later into the spring and summer. Most of your trees are flowering so early. So that was the other benefit of this, even versus the normal flowering dogwood, is it flowers so much later.
It's really like an early summer. It's not really a spring. It's maybe like really late spring or early summer. Part of the problem with, the one thing that I think prevented the early Rutgers hybrids from becoming more popular was they were bred for flower color, but they were horrible nursery plants. Like they would get tall and leggy, or they weren't respond well to pruning. So it wasn't a good looking nursery tree, which prevented a lot of people from growing them. The flower wasn't enough to make people gravitate towards that for the money. But there was definitely, I remember in the late 80s, we were selling thousands and thousands of Coosa dogwoods, and exactly the Cornish, Florida, there was so much anthracnose issue.
Yeah.
No one wanted to plant them. Same with sycamore at that time, Platanus occidentalis. Everyone moved to London plane tree. No one wanted to plant Platanus because of anthracnose. So you had all these non-natives coming in that were hailed as better.
Yeah.
And the fruit of the Kousa is probably bigger than a raspberry. It's probably
they're big.
I don't know.
I think it was in color of raspberry. Size is a lot bigger. It's almost like it's not quite the size of a ping pong ball.
I think it's toxic to humans, but I have tasted
That's
one.
what I've always heard.
I have tasted it. It's kind of has when you break it open, it has the consistency of like a pawpaw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Almost.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but the guys that I worked with, you know, that's back before there was an internet or a Google.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the guys would eat it and they go, "Oh, they're tasty. Just don't eat too many, or you'll get sick."
Let me crack open my encyclopedia and see.
Yeah, no, it'd be like, "Hey, they taste good. Just don't eat too many, or you'll get sick."
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
so that should have probably said something right there. But
it's what's really interesting to me is you think about what it takes for a non-native plant to become invasive, and that's something I hadn't thought about. Is you look at how close the population is, or how big the population. Do you have with pawpaws? Like, it's something you need to have 2 trees within like 100 feet because they're fly pollinated. If they aren't close enough, well, they aren't going to cross pollinate. Yeah. Well, it's the same thing for a lot of plants. Some of them are self fertile, but it's the same thing for a lot of plants. If you don't have that cross pollination happening, and you have a plant in one town and then a plant in 5 towns over, well, they're never going to be able to pollinate. And then you aren't going to get fruit, so it's going to look fine. But then you have a whole explosion of them, and again, you're planting this. In this case, it's a tree. So you're planting a tree. It takes a couple years before it becomes mature enough to produce fruit, and then it takes a couple years for things to figure out how to pollinate it and how to consume the fruit and all that. So is a 10-year study long enough to decide if something's invasive or not? Should we be doing those studies before they're released or after? That's something, and that's a big debate in the nursery industry, or nursery and conservation space. Yeah. You'll probably have conservation saying, "Hey, if we're going to release a new non-native plant, we should be testing this first." And then the nursery's like, "Well, you should only test it once you see it's became a problem." And
but that's the hard thing.
Yeah.
It's, you know, if quantity is a factor, you're never going to factor that in a test.
Oh yeah.
You know, I remember again late 80s selling burning bush by the tractor trailer load. So in Philadelphia, there still is. It's called the Franklin Mills Mall, which was like our Mall of America at the time. It was this huge, monstrous mall, and everything was hedged with burning bush. The amount of burning bush that went there. So there was burning bush being sold in quantities that had never really existed before because of the construction boom. And now all of a sudden burning bush are invasive. So had they never been used in that quantity, would they have become as invasive?
Yeah.
Or barberry? Like, there's not a house being built that doesn't have barberry put on it, it seems, or corporate complex that has Japanese spirea or Japanese barberry. It's just so hard to say because that took how many decades before they started to say it was a problem? 20 years? 30 years, you know, before, now it's an issue. And probably because it became so popular.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That,
and I'm thinking about it with
wildlife, like evolving to use it.
Yeah. There's so many like invasive species where you can kind of look back and see, this looked fine. And then all of a sudden it wasn't fine because of the population, everyone started to use them. And it was every single house on the block had that in their yard.
But what I hadn't thought about with this one specifically was that possibly the dogwood anthracnose came over with the Chinese dogwood, because kind of like the chestnut blight coming over with the Chinese chestnuts. Yeah, you know, and I hadn't thought about that with the dogwoods, but it makes a ton of sense.
Oh yeah, that that you can when something has a resistance to something, I learned a lot about resistance from I'm forgetting her name. She's also from Cornell, a weed scientist. Anyway, I'll look at it's like Lynn Sinoski, I want to say. I'll look up her name, okay. But with resistance to pesticides, in her case, what she was describing, it's not that by using the pesticide you're creating the resistance. The resistance is already there in a sense, but by the application you're eliminating everything that doesn't have resistance, and what's left to reproduce is resistant, which means the offspring tends to be more resistant. And then you go through, say with Roundup resistance is a common one. Okay, you use Roundup. You've eliminated everything that's not resistant to Roundup. There's some stuff that it knocked it back, but it didn't die. Well, that's what's left to reproduce. And they cross and they make a whole bunch more that are now have a little bit more resistance. Because it's the offspring, it's not necessarily the individuals. And then you basically, if you take someone with red hair and red hair is another good example. Yeah. Like, you can only have a child with red hair if both people have it as a recessive trait in their thing. So you could have two parents that don't have red hair, but it's recessive, and then they end up having a kid with red hair.
I have a son with red hair.
That's just how the cross works. But so it's the same thing with this. It's like it's not guaranteed that it's going to have more resistance. It could have less, but the next time it comes around, you're knocking out all the ones that have less resistance. The population that's left is all resistant, so they're going to breed, and now you have more that are going to be resistant, and they're mutating slightly with everything. Yeah, so every generation is going to, and that's how you do the same thing with, I'm assuming, with like chestnut blight, and you have the Chinese chestnuts. Well, the populations that were left, the ones that couldn't stand the blight, they all died. Yeah. So what was left and was crossing was the ones that were blight resistant. Then you bring it to a new country, and you have nothing that has any of that resistance, or very, very little of that resistance. So we're starting from square one versus something that's already at the boss. You're at the final boss. It's level 100, and you're still at level 1, and you got to go and beat this thing. So yeah, it's interesting. That was something that it makes sense. It makes complete sense, but I don't know if it's been, well, I doubt it's been proven.
Now I'm going to be on the lookout for Coosa dogwoods in the wild. We were actually, Agatha and I were out we were doing some kayaking Sunday, and we were in the Robbinsville area, so we stopped by Papa's Pizza for some good pizza for lunch. And we were sitting outside, and Agatha's like, "What are those trees? Are they native? Because they're really attractive." And I was like, "No, they're Chinese dogwoods." And they were beautiful. They're filled with fruit. They have a good multi-stem form. They make these really dense plant, and it's just I guess with some of these things, it's just a matter of time. You get that perfect storm, and it picks up. I'm wondering what's eating the fruit, though. Yeah, because that's a pretty big fruit.
Yeah.
It's fleshy. Like it's easy to open up. The shell's not that hard. Like you could take it and squeeze it in your hand, and pop it open. So I'm just curious what's eating it. Like I wonder if squirrels are eating it, or I don't know.
Yeah, but no, I think that was two good articles.
Two great articles. On Monday, we're going to post the vote or the poll up on the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group. When we do, make sure you vote because... And of course, the choice is yours.
Stay tuned for more of the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Welcome back to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
All right, this is where I get to take a break and you get to do a lot of talking.
I sure do. Yeah.
We're going to do listener shout-outs.
Listener shout out.
So I'm going to go first just to get it out of the way.
Yeah, get yours out of the way, Brandon.
So I wanted to give a shout out to Andra Pruitt, who has had so many good comments and posts in the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group. Andra commented and gave a little bit more background on Tom's Garden Rant article. for the person. It was either the person that wrote it or they were commenting. It's someone involved in the Tennessee Cooperative Extension and is the head of the Master Gardeners, and kind of what they're facing. And I just want to say thank you for being a kind person, being resilient, and approaching these issues and matters with kindness, and sticking in there to make a difference. And if you're not a member of the Facebook group, go become a member of the Facebook group. Look at the poll for the last buzz and look at some of Vandra's comments. But she's just had a lot of great comments overall, and I just want to say thank you for listening and being a member. All right.
Yeah, so I have a whole bunch. It will
be lunch by the time you're done.
So I'm just going to read little bits of some of my favorite parts that they wrote for us. But we had my fave Packer on Apple Podcasts that loved that we brought a lot of great information without taking ourselves too seriously. Which I don't know if we take ourselves seriously at all.
I think
that's some of our charm is sometimes we can say some really, really dumb stuff.
Yeah.
And admit it, which I think is important. It's when you find out you're wrong, it makes you a little bit smarter. So
come on, we just spent 5 minutes at the beginning of the podcast looking up the word pedicel.
I think it was quite a bit more than 5 minutes.
Yeah, probably.
Then we had Amy MZH. Frank, can you do me a favor and keep a checklist of when I say each person so I know I got them all?
I'll cross them off.
All right,
yes.
Cool. They wrote that it was their first review of a podcast ever, which that's what a compliment that is. And they also wanted to keep a secret from their teenagers. So I don't know if your teenagers are listening to this, but maybe. But no, that's really flattering that you went out of your way to review our podcast for the first time ever, and that you've really enjoyed that Camille Dungy episode, because we really did as well. Yeah. And I think our next episode is a lot of people enjoy that too. Then we had Gal J, that has been listening since 2020, and they're only reviewing us now. Think about all the costs.
We're coming up on we're 6 months away from our four-year anniversary.
Yeah, but no, we really appreciate that you recognize how we listen to what people write in and want to provide content that people are interested in, and if they ask us to feature someone, we try and get them on. Doesn't always work.
No, and
we try to.
We appreciate you sticking with us, because I know it took us a while to find our voice and our format that worked, and it was because of feedback from listeners like you that helped us get there. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, Peperica says they look forward to this podcast every week.
Peperica Swirl.
Peperica Swirl. I missed that part. Then Gadget 19KS 19Ks. It's hard to pronounce some of these. It's hard to figure out what they intended with the name. Likes that it has the perfect blend of native plant information and science, fun, and pizza. So we do talk about pizza.
We do talk about pizza.
So registration failed. That they're an estate gardener in Cape Cod and really loves listening to us on Fridays when they're working. Which that we even talked in the next episode. There's a couple, like we know of a garden center that plays us over the radio every once in a while, until they get too many customer complaints. We have a couple nurseries that have put us over the air, and only one HR report I've heard of for torture and torment, making an uninhabitable workplace.
I'm trying to remember who it was. Brad Madrinsky that suggested we need to be syndicated on NPR. I'm waiting for that phone call.
Yeah, that would be a good one. So, then I still have more, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Then we had Horticultural Helper, has binged every episode and can say with authority that it's time well spent, and that we are the perfect blend of time-sensitive info, recent discoveries, observation, what's blooming, and how different communities in the field tackle issues. So, and says that we earned our 5 stars.
Ooh,
so I really like one. Let's see.
You have two more.
I'm losing track. We got a bunch.
Yeah.
And you heard our pleas and answered, so we really like it. We had Johnny Hickory that thanks us.
Did you see that one? Because that was from Canada, so I don't know if.
Yeah, I can see it right here.
All right.
Yeah, so Johnny Hickory. I'm looking at the actual reviews, the Chartable list of them all. So, and thanks for all the stream wildlife inspiration, and looks forward to the podcast every week. So thank you, Johnny, from up in Canada. And last one is Wayside Lynn, who likes this or that because we're always introducing articles that send her down new rabbit holes into the gardening world, and loves the style of our podcast because it's not preachy but fun.
Wayside Lynn actually comments on our post on Podbean, which is another way that you can communicate with us. If you're listening on Podbean, you can now, do we count those also? If we're counting Spotify, or
I think we should, yeah.
All right.
Now, I don't know where else you can leave podcast reviews, but
yeah, like you can leave episode comments, kind of like Spotify.
Yeah.
So we'll have to count those.
You can on YouTube. You can leave stuff, whatever there is. We're gonna take them all.
We're counting it all. Twitter,
and then we're gonna. Well, you can't listen on Twitter.
So. No, I know. That's true. So it's got to be somewhere where you can listen.
Yeah.
All right.
I guess if no,
because then you're counting Facebook. Yeah, I agree. It has to be.
It's going to be too crazy.
It has to be where you can listen.
Yeah.
All right.
So, all right.
Wow, that was a lot. I don't even know where we're at. But I really appreciate it. That goes a long way. We see the change in our rankings on Apple Podcasts because of all these reviews, and that's a big part of it. And we thank all of you for binging or being with us from the beginning, or even just finding us now and being passionate enough to let us know. Thank you so much. I'm very humbled with the amount of 5-star reviews that came in this.
Yeah, so all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of you are now in the running, along with all of our other past reviews, to get a signed copy of Camille Dungy's book, Soil, The Story of a Black Mother's Garden, which I have 2 copies right here.
2 copies.
So we're giving away 2.
And Camille actually joined the Facebook group and said she was excited to find out who wins the episodes. So, or the episodes.
Talking about follow-up, Fran, we didn't realize that Camille was right in our backyard. We had no idea.
She had a speaking engagement at the Princeton Seminary on Friday night, and I found out literally probably right before the event. I had no idea. And she commented she was scolded by a lot of people for not letting them know that she was in the area, and forgot how close the East Coast can be.
Yes,
sometimes because she was maybe from here.
30 minutes?
Yeah, 30 minutes.
It was close.
So I scolded her as well. All right, so we don't have any no questions or comments from the question and comment line. No Grow Read a Book.
No.
No Tom's Petty, or not that I'm one to complain. This isn't really a lengthy topic, but I just wanted to throw it out there, and we talk about this in next week's episode as well, that we started getting calls. It's the first time I had ever heard of it, where the government was requesting that native plants come from a certified pesticide and herbicide-free nursery. And I don't know any. I don't know of any.
I know of, well, not certified. I know of a handful of nurseries that do that, but aren't certified. But even then, as as I've talked to them, they're like, well, we don't use anything, but we're buying in our liners. So we get all our small plants from somewhere else, and we try and buy from people we trust, and we'll have conversations when we can, but we don't know everything they do.
It's a wonderful thought and idea, but then we started to think about it. We've had this conversation when we talk to Xerces about pesticides and herbicides. That is it scalable to a big size? I don't know. And having this conversation with one of the people that called to inquire, they had the same question if it was scalable, and they're like, "Oh, well, we know this place doesn't use herbicides and pesticides." I was like, "Well, that's funny because we sent them a truckload of material today, and I know that we use pesticides and herbicides. Now we use it sparingly. When you look at our plants, you can see that they're eaten. You can see that maybe there's a little mildew, a powdery mildew from the time of the year. we're trying to. There's no neonics, and we're trying to use it sparingly. But one of our coworkers posted, like, in order to be a nursery, you have to get inspected to get a certificate every year, nursery certificate that says you are pesticide free, or not pest free. Yeah. So can you be pest free without spraying any herbicide and pesticide to get your nursery certificate? I don't know. It's just I'm not condemning it or saying this is a bad idea. It's just I hadn't thought about it, but it's very lofty aspirations.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that was one of the things he actually brought up too was like aphids on milkweed. And from a nursery side of things, like to uphold your nursery standards, you need to get rid of those.
Yeah.
But on a consumer end of things, there's a lot of people who look at that and say, I'm going to buy that one because I know if it has aphids, I know it hasn't been treated.
Yeah.
Or I'm a lot more confident that it hasn't been treated.
And then you're going to get ladybugs. You're going to get all these beneficial insects.
It's a tough balance because it's one of those things where, you have pests on the plant and then you're transporting to other areas. That's like a big, big no-no. We just talked about invasive plant spread, but that's one of the ways invasive insects spread. So it's a delicate conversation. It's something in a dream world that would be
ideal,
really, really possible, but it's a lot more complicated than I think a lot of people might think it is.
You know, the nice thing is if that's their goal, and you put it out there and you throw the gauntlet down and say this is what we want, it kind of makes people work towards achieving it. Same way we talk about, hey, what are the peat moss alternatives out there? What can we do to be more sustainable? If that's your goal, you're going to work towards it. I would love to know or see the work being done towards that to move. In a perfect world, we would all love to not use herbicide and pesticides. And I think we're exemplary in our lack of use of those things. And it challenges the traditional view of what a nursery should look like.
Yeah.
You know, like a traditional ornamental nursery is kind of like a lawn in a lot of ways. Like it's well manicured, there's no weeds, there's no insect interaction, everything is perfect. And that's not necessarily what's best for the plants or the pollinators or the environment or the food web. So it kind of challenges and breaks down those stereotypes of what a nursery should look like. And maybe everyone can work towards those goals. But I would love to see that, but I just hadn't heard of it before. And I just don't know how attainable it is right away.
Yeah, it's but I don't know if there's an actual like certification program.
I've never seen it or
I think that was what struck me is asking for like a certified, but I don't know of a certification program for that. Yeah. I know there's one that's SANC, and I forget what it stands for, which is a nursery thing, but that's like that you're a way to, if you get that certification, it means that you're doing a lot of things to keep yourself pest free.
Yeah.
So that it makes it a little easier to sell plants, and not have to get inspections if you're going out of region and that kind of stuff.
But we know of people using biological control, like other beneficial insects. You know, almost every nursery uses IPM, integrated pest management, where you're inspecting. There's a lot of things that can be done to limit what you use.
Yeah. There's something else I was just thinking about, like as I brought up you have these phytosanitary inspections. So we typically don't ship stuff out of our region. Usually when we get requests from out of our region, we say, hey, like this is, you might want to look for someplace closer to you because we're doing the local ecotype thing. But every once in a while we'll get orders because they just can't find stuff closer. And there's some states that require that we like treat our plants with I don't know if it's ever been a neonic, but like there'll be a list and say, hey, you have to treat your plants with this pesticide while being watched by someone from the Department of Agriculture, so they know you actually did it.
Yeah.
And then before you can even ship it. So then you have a treatment, you have a 12-hour, 24-hour reentry usually with that. And then, so we got to treat it and then load it up and then ship it all within, and it's a really narrow window you have to actually move it then until you'd have to treat it again.
And a lot of it is treating the soil, not the plant.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're doing,
I've seen both.
Have you seen both?
Yeah,
okay.
it's with insects, certain stuff and this is a Japanese beetle.
Yeah.
I'm worried it would happen for spotted lanternfly. That was a concern at one point. Is other states were going to say, hey, stuff has to be treated to kill the spotted lanternflies before it even gets shipped here.
Yeah.
And New Jersey's Department of Agriculture and Pennsylvania's Department of Agriculture really advocated for not doing that and doing like these self-check things.
Yeah, and it's
I don't think a lot of them. I'm sure plenty of them got out through plant material, but I doubt that was the major cause of their spread is through nursery stock.
Like I know if you're shipping bare root, it's a little bit easier because there's no soil and you're dipping the plants, smaller plants. But then, like when I was at Princeton Nurseries, in order to ship a Baldwin burlap tree, say a 2-inch caliber tree, a 24-inch root ball that weighs hundreds of pounds, the inspector was like, if you want to ship this into an area that is gypsy moth or Japanese beetle free, you have to build a vat, mix this chemical, and submerge each root ball for 20 minutes while I watch you do it.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to do it. So we're not going to do the process. It's too expensive. You can't do it. We're not going to monitor it. You're just not allowed to ship there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things to factor in to those areas, and maybe that answer is if you're shipping all locally, like if you're all doing eco type and you're just shipping in your local region, then those things aren't even a factor. But it's just if it's a government certification program, it goes against getting your nursery certificate or a phytosanitary certificate, which is they're not counterproductive, but they're opposites.
Yeah. So good convo, Fran.
Yeah, thank you. So this week for Take It or Leave It, Tom is supplying the topic, and it comes in form of a video that I have.
And this is actually something my mom sent to me. So
all right,
I don't know how we could edit it out where they don't say the brand, but
that's okay.
It doesn't matter.
That's okay.
It's out there on Facebook for everyone to listen to.
All right, so I'm gonna cue it up. Let's. I haven't listened to it. This is the first I'm hearing it. And it's not playing. Why is that?
Do you have the sound turned up, Fran?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. I know you've done that before.
No, I actually, and we played it beforehand.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
it was really
it's
loud.
It's just not playing because I turned it down, and now no sound is coming out. Let me see.
Do you want me to play it for you again?
Oh, there we go. All right. There we go. For some reason, I had to unplug and play.
Come with me as I head to my favorite plant nursery to get some fresh air. My seasonal allergies have been acting up, so today I'm on the hunt for a female tree. I've partnered with the makers of Claritin to tell you all about the Diversity Tree Project, a program aiming to help curb rising pollen levels by planting more female trees. Did you know that male trees produce pollen and female trees don't? I'm planting a female tree in my yard to do my part to help reduce pollen levels and help restore botanical balance.
What does a ginger do?
That was the next.
Yeah. Friend, that could have been a lot worse.
You never know what's going to pop up.
Now I know what your videos you're watching in your free time is all about ginger children, of which you have one.
Did I ever tell? I know this is so cruel.
You want to save it for your secret?
I'll save it for my secret. Something that I did. So I do have a son that's a ginger, and it's a comment.
Does he like you calling him that?
It doesn't faze him.
Okay.
It doesn't faze him. So, but it was a funny comment that I made as a joke to him that I'll share as a secret.
All right.
Well,
basically my question with that is does planting female trees curb the male pollen that's in the air?
I don't know. And it's,
or I guess, are you buying that?
I'm not buying that because to me, now we do know that you don't need as many males per female. Like if you're trying to produce, say, like winterberry holly, you're trying to get a berry, they tell you you need one male plant per 10 female plants. But But how does that affect the food web by producing less pollen? Like, so, hey, it's inconvenient for us, so let's start limiting plant gender in the wild, which sounds a little ridiculous to me, but you can't control it outside of your yard. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
there's so many factors that
I had heard at one point that we're seeing larger pollen clouds, and they think it is because of there's not as much somehow the trees are sensing there's not as much reproduction going on.
Okay.
And the pollen's just kind of going out there, and then there's it's doing nothing. And somehow the trees are responding by putting out more pollen. I don't know how all that works, or where I even heard it, but I remember hearing that someplace. I don't know. So in that theory, yeah, planting a female tree that's receptive, but you're going to have to plant a female tree that's also the same as the male trees in your area to receive some of that pollen. I can understand that. It's getting some of the pollen out of the air. How many female trees are you going to have to plant to take enough pollen out of the air? Like and this is, again, going back to sometimes we have an overreaction. We planted a lot of male trees because the female trees are what people consider messy, and they're producing fruit, and the fruit's dropping on the sidewalks or on the ground, and that's what people don't want. But yeah, to me, a lot of these are wind-pollinated species. The ones that you're going to have the allergies to are wind-pollinated species. Is in the air. It's just going wherever the wind takes it. Yeah. So by having like a female tree, is that really going to help you that much? I guess it's one of those things. If everyone planted female trees that were the same as what's producing pollen in their area, yeah, I guess it could make a difference. Yeah. But the Diversity project that they have is
I was going to say, I don't know
plant
much.
more female trees to kind of do what we just talked about, and they're doing the first female forest in Richmond, Virginia, at Forest Hill Park. So they're gonna, which was one of the worst cities for allergies in 2022. So I don't know. I can buy that this could help. I just don't know how much it's going to help.
How much of a culprit is tree pollen compared to shrubs or herbaceous? Like, obviously a large tree can produce a lot of pollen.
I don't know. You think about it. I'm trying to think of wind-pollinated shrubs, and I don't have a lot that are like coming to mind. I'm sure I'm missing a whole bunch where I can think of a ton of wind-pollinated trees. Yeah, I don't know. But it's not, goldenrod is not what you're allergic to. It's ragweed. So stop saying it's goldenrod. So, that's just, I had to say that before.
But when you think about, all right, so you think about, like, certain trees are male trees by cultivar that are planted because, like you said, like ginkgo, people don't want ginkgo fruit because it's a very odorous, pungent smell. So, people are planting, but if you're planting straight species, whether it's male or female, like, I don't know why you would choose one over the other. Or say I'm not planting any male trees. Yeah. Like, just because my allergies are bad. Because I guarantee you, planting enough female trees, you're still using Claritin. Yeah. Like, your allergies are probably, you're going to have good years, you're going to have bad years. Yeah. I don't know. That just seems like a very extreme knee-jerk reaction.
To me, it seems like a well-intentioned project that is there more for the appeal of it, for people who don't necessarily know. I'm not saying we know what we're talking about, but people who are less knowledgeable in plants than we are, which there's a few. There's a few of those people out there, but it's saying, oh, look, Claritin's saying plant female trees, and look, it's greenwashing in a way. But
I'm just trying to figure out what Claritin's take is on that.
Yeah.
How are they? What was the reason of this? Because their goal is to sell Claritin. Their goal is if everyone's allergies went away, they wouldn't have a business model.
There's a big concept in business, which is actually a true. It's a good thing. It's a true thing. And this is where I think, like, I feel like they're trying to do that, but it's missing. But a concept in business is you want to help a person before they need you.
Yeah.
So if you have like a storm cleanup company and there's a hurricane coming, you don't want to be the person after the hurricane saying, hey, call me to help clean up your home. You want to be the person who beforehand is giving people all the tools so they don't need you.
Yeah.
Hey, shutter your windows with this kind of 2x4, this kind of board, and you're going to have better success of your windows not breaking. Do this, do that. Here's what you should have in your storm preparedness kit. Like, make sure you have extra batteries for a flashlight. Make sure you have this and this kind of food and this kind of food. That, if you send out that email to your mailing list, people are then going to, when the storm comes and they need help, they're going to be like, these guys were trying to help me. I'm calling them.
Yeah.
I'm not calling the guy who's trying to take my money afterwards. I feel like that's what they're trying to do here. I just don't know if I don't know if it actually works, and two, I don't know if it actually works.
I don't know that it makes a big enough difference to tell everyone, all right, if you're planting a tree right now, maybe you're helping future generations. You know what I mean? Like, you're not planting, like you're talking how fast growth rates are in trees and when it's going to become a pollen issue in a certain effect. I don't know that you're really making that much of a difference, at least not in your lifetime. And I don't know what imbalance you're creating in the future.
Yeah. We've had a lot of like tree botanical sexism in the past with planting all male trees.
Yeah.
And it caused a lot of this problem. But I don't see how planting female trees is the actual solution. I think it's cutting down the male trees and replacing them with female trees is the solution.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's missing. And they, for their messaging, for the greenwashing stand, they can't say, oh, you got to cut down trees too, because people don't like that. It's true that you need to cut down trees, like for a lot of things.
Well,
but people don't like that.
More female trees are more trees that can be pollinated.
Yeah.
So producing more offspring. So if you're planting the wrong female trees, you could be
then
more
you're
of
having
an issue.
And that was the other thing. Like they just said female trees. It's not. They didn't
native.
It's not native species. It's not. So go plant all kinds of invasive female trees, and that's good under their watch. And I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than we're making it sound. What their whole Diversity project is, but
I appreciate that the holistic approach to tackling it. I just don't know that I agree with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I just feel like there's something we don't know that this is going to create a problem down the road.
Yeah.
And it's probably, maybe there's not that many people doing it that it even makes, maybe I'm making a bigger deal out of it than it actually is, which is very possible.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm not susceptible to knee-jerk reactions myself. I just don't know. I'd have to research it a lot more before I would either get behind. Like, at face value, I'd have to leaf it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm leafing it too. I'm going to do a little more research on this too, and we'll do it for follow-up on the next buzz.
Let's do a follow-up on that.
Because, but I want to see what you thought. When you just watch or listen to it in this case, if you were going to say, oh, that makes sense, or I don't know if that's going to work. Like I did. My mom sent it to me, and she's like, you should talk about this on the podcast. And I watched it. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't sound like it's going to work at all.
No, I agree. Like I'm like, I'm not sure that that's the right logic.
Yep.
You know, it doesn't track well with me, but maybe I'm off. It just doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, exactly. So,
right,
cool. That is all we have for you today. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We hope you enjoyed listening to The Buzz. Thank you again, everyone, for listening to Native Plants, Healthy Planet, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
How can you not thank RJ Comer for this iconic Buzz intro theme music? Make sure you stream or buy RJ's music wherever you consume music, and check out his Americana playlist on Pandora. Thank you to Dave Bennett for our Native Plant Anthem. I love that that's a fixture on the podcast now. Follow us on Twitter, or I should change that to say X. Follow us on X at Pineland Nursery, Facebook at Pinelands Nursery NJ, Instagram at Pinelands Nursery, and YouTube at Pinelands Nursery. We also have Instagram at nativeplants_healthy planet. Don't forget about the question and comment line. You can call us at 215-346-6189. I will repeat that, 215-346-6189. Ask a question or leave a comment, and we'll do our best to play it on a future episode of The Buzz. And we've had so many wonderful conversations on the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group and feedback. We appreciate it. You keep us going, and you make this happen. So thank you.
Yeah, so you can buy Native Plants Healthy Planet merch at our website, www.nativeplantshealthyplanet.com. That was 7 W's that time. So there's a link right at the top, takes you to your Teespring store. We got shirts, aprons, phone cases. A lot of people buying phone cases, I saw.
Wow.
I just did a whole report to break down like who bought what. I was like, wow, a lot of it's not just Russ Fenardi.
What?
Unless maybe it is just Russ Fenardi.
Maybe he's giving him his gifts.
He's got his retirement phone. He's got his personal phone. He's giving him his gifts. Yeah, maybe it's all.
He's got burner phones.
Yeah, burner phones. This is for my native plant dealer. But yeah, we have all stuff up there, and we don't keep any of that money. It all goes into our PayPal account, and then at a point in time, which we've done 4 times now, when there's a big enough sum in there that we feel is generous enough that we can give to someone where they're not going to be like, oh, they only gave me $10. Yeah. We give it to someone who we think is doing really good stuff in the native plant and outdoor space. So we're working towards our next gift, which hopefully we do before the end of the year.
Oh, that would be awesome. Goal. I would appreciate that.
So keep buying shirts and buy them for friends. Buy them for kids. We have kids' shirts up there too, so you can give them like, it's my niece's birthday coming up.
I'm going to photo op.
Get a nice shirt for her. And
make a nice little social media post out of it.
My son has one. He started going to nature school. Compliment on the first day.
Awesome.
We're on the first day too.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So you can also listen to our podcast really wherever you're listening now. So you can keep listening there, or you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. Not Stitcher, excuse me.
I have to
iHeartRadio. Stitcher is no longer.
I have
doing
to update the outro a little bit.
And not just us. I don't think Stitcher does any podcasts.
No, they're done.
They ceased as an organization.
They produce podcasts, but they're not a streaming service any longer.
And do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. That goes a long, long way. Do a little write-up, and you're entered to win Camille Dungy's book, Soil, the Story of a Black Mother's Garden, that we just had. We have 2 copies to give away there. And you can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Podbean, is what we just discussed and decided today. We're going to be giving away those books in not next Buzz episode, the one after that, episode 180. We're going to be giving those away. So you have about 3 weeks to get your review in to count. So if you didn't heed our last call,
do it now.
So with that, Fran, you have today's secret.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever shared this story with you, but I was on the road with my kids, and I have to preface it by saying that my kids were teenagers at this point. So they weren't like little kids when I made the joke. But we were driving somewhere and we're having conversation, and my son Cole asked, because we were talking about his red hair, and he was giving us facts for people with red hair. And he's like, so who in our family had red hair? He's like, because I asked Mom, and she couldn't think of anyone in her family that had red hair. He's like, how about you? And I kind of straight-faced and went, I don't know. If we ever figure out who your real father is, we can ask. We can ask who in his family had red hair. And the look on his face, he was probably like 17 at the time. And my oldest had to turn away because he was trying to not crack up. But then once I saw the look on his face, I had to say, it's a joke. It's a joke. I'm your real dad. I'm not. I'm kidding with you. But his face was his jaw dropped to the floor. So there you go. I'm a mean dad.
Yeah. That's probably something that crossed the line. You had told me that story before.
Okay.
And I think I thought that then too.
He was old. Now, had he been 8 or 9, probably really, really bad taste. He was 17.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I immediately withdrew the joke. So.
Yeah. That's probably one you probably shouldn't touch realistically.
Yeah.
It's like you never joke about as an employer, you should never joke about someone getting fired.
Yeah.
That's
true.
In
That's
bad
not funny.
taste. Funny sometimes in the employer's opinion, but it's not something that's very serious for other people.
Yeah.
That's probably another one.
No.
Don't joke about actual paternity.
I guaranteed him that I was his real father.
So, all right. Well, it was a secret. with that thank you everyone. I'm Tom.
I am Fran. Thanks again, everyone. Coming up next week, I think, I'm just trying to think. Oh, this will be coming up next. We have Tim Mack from Birdscaping Industries, and we had a very insightful conversation about his unique business model.
Yeah, unique business model and how he got into it was really, really fascinating. Yeah. And Fran brings it up in the episode quite a bit. So many people are saying, hey, I want this, but I can't do it myself, and I can't find anyone to do it for me. Well, we have a potential solution in your neck of the woods. So depending on where you live.
Yeah.
If it's
he's in Larchmont, New York.
New Rochelle, New York area.
Yeah. So I'm sure he'd be willing to expand his reach if the business opportunities were there. So. Yeah. So make sure you tune in for that. It was a fantastic episode, and we can't wait for you to hear it. And we'll see you again next time. And until then, keep it native.
In meadows, woods, wetlands, and dales grows a bounty of beauty that never fails. Our native plants, so diverse and so rare, treasures of our land beyond compare. From the plains below, soaring oaks above, each plant has a place each family's love. Monarch caterpillars launch milk, wheat so tall, bees buzz about, sipping nectar from all. Oh, native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand. To protect and preserve our generations of calm, and beauty and potency second to none. To protect and preserve our earth, to restore the native plant move that you just can't ignore.
Goldenrod, asters, and flowers galore. Monarch is so stunning, can't help but adore. Their colors, their fragrance, a feast for the eyes. Their value to wildlife, no need to disguise.
Native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.